I now have the pleasure of introducing our panelists. Tonight's panel includes all winners of the National Design Award for Fashion. The 2004 winner, Yoli Tang, has a strong and consistent approach to clothing design that incorporates seamless efficiency, striking geometry, and concise functionality. Based in New York City, Yoli designs for the urban nomad, a postmodern consumer who demands adaptable and low-maintenance clothing that appears deceptively simple but makes a powerful impression. Women's wear designer and 2006 winner Maria Cornejo's career has spanned London, Paris, Milan, and Tokyo. She moved to New York City in 1996, where she began her clothing line Zero, noted for its sculptural garments that are at once feminine, architectural, minimal, and modern. The 2009 winner, Francisco Costa, has been creative director of Calvin Klein Collection for Women since 2002. Named Women's Wear Designer of the Year in 2006 by the Council of Fashion Designers of America, Francisco has worked directly with Calvin Klein as well as other top design houses, including Gucci and Oscar de la Renta. And our moderator this evening is Robin Givhan. She's the fashion editor for The Washington Post. In 2006, she won the Pulitzer Prize for Criticism, the first time such an award was given to a fashion writer. The Pulitzer Committee explained its rationale by by noting her witty, closely observed essays that transform fashion criticism into cultural criticism. Please join me in welcoming everyone.
By just saying that we've just come off of a really interesting runway season, I think, at least from my point of view, because it seemed like there were some fundamental changes in the fashion industry, in the aesthetic sensibility of what was going on the runways. It seemed like it was a season of transition towards something that was more streamlined, more sophisticated, and more refined, which I think is sort of the turf in the fashion industry that you guys all sort of occupy. So I thought our conversation would divide into two sections. The first being a little bit of a discussion about the designing of the clothes, and then part two being the selling of the clothes. And I am hoping that this will be a very informal conversation and that the audience will be prepped to ask questions. And if you don't have any questions, then I will pretend to be a professor and I will interrogate you and force you to ask questions. So the first, I wanted to start, I think, probably with a softball. And that is, if each of you could describe for our audience the niche that you feel that you fill as a designer, who your customer is. And there's one thing, you're not allowed to describe your customer as any woman who wants something special. How about I start with Yoli?
Okay.
Who is the Yoli customer?
Well, I can answer it two ways. I like to think that I dress every woman, and then specifically, I like to think that I dress a discerning woman who has poise, confidence, and the ability to make her own judgment and decisions. How's that?
And by that, do you mean that you dress a woman who does not feel that she has to adhere to trends?
She does not need to play the game, necessarily.
Okay.
Or adhere to somebody else's idea of what looks good on her. She makes her own choices.
Francisco.
I think our customer is, I would say she's 25 to 98.
I think that includes everyone here.
And the reason I'm saying that is that because since I joined Calvin, obviously Calvin had a huge following. We do have an amazing following, but I think I also brought a little bit of somehow a more playful side to it. So we've been seeing that more and more often. Quite a mix of people coming to those stores and buying absolutely different things. So I think it's we kind of broadened much more. Also, demographics have changed so much, and we've seen a lot of but it's much more diverse today. So, but what I'm saying is that we still have our basics, our core of our collection, which are directed to a businesswoman, a woman who is more professional, and also we have a part of the collection which is a little more playful, perhaps younger. So that seems where we're standing now, and has broadened, the horizon for us. And I think it's an important thing today, to reach a larger audience.
I mean, often when a designer's collection is described to some degree as being a bit more minimal, that immediately calls to mind intellectual as well. I mean, do you find that that would be an accurate description of your work? And if you do, or if you don't, do you think that that characterization, intellectual fashion, is a bit contrived? Or?
I think it's a bit contrived. I find that the clothes are much more fun, much more easy in a way, much more playful in a sense. If I think of, obviously you go to an intellectual, it's all about thinking of how we present a collection, what it is that we're offering, and it's all about filling the needs of a woman's wardrobe in a sense. So you do think, what have I offered last season that's not going to be as relevant this season? I offered enough dresses, so shall I move into more trousers, more pants? So you do think of this wardrobe, you do think of the closet of this woman, but I find that the approach could be intellectual, but the clothes itself, it should have some ease, and it should be type of clothes that that takes one. It takes a little bit of an intellectual person to understand, but the clothes shouldn't be that intellectual. I don't know if I make any sense.
No, you're making perfect sense. And Maria.
Oh God! After these two, I have to say something.
I will not ask you if your clothes are intellectual, but who do you find is especially drawn to your work? I mean, is it a woman with a particular sensibility?
I think I have to agree with you, Lee. We're not advertisers, so we don't get any press. So basically, the clients that we have are very much, they go for the product, what they see. It's a very sort of like heartfelt buy in a way, because it's not sold on press or advertising. So it's a different dynamic. For us, so in a way, we're sort of trying to appeal, I feel, for me, from a very basic point of view, it's whether you love it or you don't, and it's a very heartfelt thing. It's very organic. In a way, yeah, we all get into an intellectual trip somewhere along the line with the fabrics and things, and I think that's the fun part. But at the end of the day, it's like I personally am my own worst client, and I always look at things and I go, I hate that, or this isn't comfortable, and I'm always trying to move to make things more interesting, but also approachable and comfortable and wearable. And my thing was always, when I started the store, was that being in New York, I wanted to do something that was interesting, but to try to be in that middle market which was not the high street, not what everybody was doing, not super commercial, not a pair of jeans, and not be a designer where it's only like the pictures in a magazine that are totally alienated to somebody like me.
Right.
I wanted
trying to figure out which end is up.
I was trying to figure out that I wanted clothes that were beautifully made and interesting, but were real. And I always say to my assistants, which they always love, I said, I can't wear this to Trader Joe's. This doesn't cut it, I can't throw it in the washing machine. I'm very pragmatic.
Says the same
Yeah,
thing.
I do.
mean,
In fact,
yeah, I mean, I have 2 kids, so I mean, my realities are different. I'm very everything has to be either washable or packed really easily, or if I have to think too much about an outfit, then it's obviously not a good thing,
I think people often wonder, I think they understand or have some sense of how a female designer designs for other women. And they make an assumption that in many ways she's designing for herself. And I'm wondering if you can address that, whether or not that is actually true. I mean, in your case, to some degree it is. And Francisco, if you can talk a little bit about what does it mean when you're a man designing for women? Is it a completely voyeuristic approach to design in the sense that it's how you
I
want
try
a
every
woman
single piece
to
of clothes
look?
on.
Or do you try to put yourself in her shoes?
I think it's you.
It's
No,
you.
I
You're the guy.
you look to an aesthetical point of view, what it is, and obviously, in a company where Calvin created such an incredible vision, it's such a vision, it's very challenging to keep that moving, and making that happen. I find that, a clothes needs to be practical, it needs to be also something that we speak to. You dress because you're also to impress in a funny way. It's not to impress, but there's an element to dress. When you get dressed, I think there's the connection to the third person.
Mm-hmm.
So I think.
That idea of how someone is going to perceive you and how you want
I think that's maybe we don't want to talk about it, but I think it's there. You go to a store and you want to put something on. You ultimately feel, do I look good? And
Right.
why do you care if you look good? Because you want to impress, right? There's that,
No, absolutely. And I think people often feel like the one time that they know that they don't look great, well, they run into like their arch enemy.
Right. So when obviously, I think my take is really aesthetical. It's really, the fabrics have really been amazing. I'm really crazy about fabrics, and it's something sort of inherent a little bit from Calvin's passion for fabric as well. So I wish I could put the clothes on, because then I would understand it more. But I think it is pro and cons, in the whole.
I mean, I think you're
design
right. I think
aspect.
the con of having designed your own collections, like I was having this conversation with Marisha, my partner, saying, just because I'm getting old doesn't mean the clothes have to get old. So I'm always also trying to reach. I have an 18-year-old daughter, and for me, even if I can't wear those shorts, I mean, I can see her wearing them. I can see
You
the
risk
girls.
being too close to the collection in some ways.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's good to be open, and I mean, I've just started doing men's one. All of a sudden, I'm having to figure out
I
what,
saw that.
and I'm like, whoa! And you know what? It's actually quite interesting to try and put yourself in the other, because then you bring another perspective as well, which is also interesting. And I think it's also good,
Do you experience the same thing, Yoli? I mean, do you feel that sometimes you have to, like, consciously put distance between yourself and the clothes so that it's not too much about Yoli's closet?
It's not too much about Yoli's closet. Yoli wears, I mean, my wardrobe is like a man's wardrobe. I have multiples of the same thing. It's a terrible thing to confess to when you're in fashion, but I like efficiency and economy in clothes. So
That is not good for sales.
Pardon me?
That's not good for sales.
Well, I don't buy into this year's model. I'm sorry. It's like I'm not into the car philosophy. I think that good design it's in essence what all of us do, and believe in. But good design is pretty much timeless. I mean, and when I speak about good design, I mean, a Post-it, a paperclip, and a Maria Conejo or Calvin Klein.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, Yoli.
It took 2 minutes.
No, I was trying to decide whether it should be Francisco
You
or
forgot my name. You
Calvin.
forgot my name.
Not that they're sensitive in any way. I mean, speaking, as you mentioned good design, is there such a thing as American design? In a global world where we often complain that, it's so difficult now to go and, to go on vacation or to go on a business trip to another country or even just to another city and bring back something that's unique to that place. That things have become so homogenized, you can get anything from anywhere. Is there still something that you define as American design as you all work in New York?
I mean, I think the whole American thing for me was about making things approachable and wearable within being design and being a little bit intellectual, but just making them approachable. And I think that's the good side of American design. I feel like, that's made people not ashamed to say that, actually making a pair of cotton trousers that fit really well is a good thing. It's not a bad thing. Whereas in Paris, there's all these crazy collections that get designed, which are amazing, but nobody ever wears them. You know, I'm sorry, but you know, this is the other extremes. You know, there's, and I think in American design, there's a lot of good design. A lot of it doesn't even get a look in. It doesn't get a chance. You know, and I think, in a way, I'm really glad that Fashion Week starts with New York now, because by the time you get to Paris and the editors have been traveling around for a month, you have to be doing somersaults in a G-string to impress them, to be honest. I mean, it gets to that point.
Just a
There was,
G-string,
there was
not
an element
somersaults.
of
Do
people.
you know what I mean? It's like it gets so out there, and then you never see any. I mean, my thing about clothes is that if clothes aren't worn, they're not alive. They're not good design. If they need to be worn, they need to be lived. If they're sitting somewhere just hanging, they're not well designed.
Do you think there are designers out there, though, I mean, honestly, who, even though they're putting the most outrageous things on the runway, don't have somewhere in the back of their mind an actual belief that somewhere out there in the distant place, there's this one woman,
Yeah.
and she is willing to wear it. You know, she's the globe-trotting socialite CEO with the private jet and, you know, the endless fortune, and she's 10 feet tall. And
Yeah, I'm sure. It just doesn't affect, you know, it doesn't relate to my reality, and I feel like it doesn't relate to a lot of women's realities, you know. I mean, I'm 47 years old, and most of the time I personally feel totally alienated by fashion magazines. I don't even want to look at them. I just feel they've gone so far in the other direction that, you know, anybody can make a 15-year-old model look good. It takes a lot to make a 47-year-old woman look good. Do you know what I mean? It's
you
just
do a
so,
very good job.
but you know what I mean? It's like there's this big disconnect, which I'm really anti, and I think, you know, in a way, it's good that certain things are a little coming down and things are coming back to things that are a bit more authentic. And it's not just about the picture, it's not just about the glitz, and it's not just about, you know, smokes and mirrors. You know, there's actually more about substance right now. And I think that's, you know, with all of us, you know, we're all trying really hard to design things that are well made, beautifully designed, hopefully wearable as well.
Is that
And,
sort
you
of
know-
essentially the undercurrent that runs through all American design, that there's always an element of pragmatism that's there, or no?
I hope so, because I think that's the strength of American design in a way, I feel, you know? I would have never designed the clothes that I'm designing now if I was in Paris or in London. It took me to go from London to Paris to Japan to Italy and end up living in New York for me to realize that actually, yes, I love clothes, but I want to wear them every day. I don't want to just wear them once a week. Just when I go to a club, which I don't anymore actually, but you know.
Francisco, I know that preceding your arrival there, I mean, Calvin Klein often struggled with this sort of following the European collections, and there's being this perception that the American designers were constantly echoing what they saw in Europe. And as a result, it seemed like American designers strove very hard to prove their creative skills, to sort of prove sort of the international market wrong, that all that they could really do was something that was very practical. I mean, how do you balance that? Because, I mean, I know you've brought some really intriguing and artful sensibility to Calvin Klein. I mean, how do you balance that with that pragmatism that really is about American design?
Well, I mean, we keep that's why we have a customer base that's very wide, you know, and we building more and more, because I think we're offering, you know, both worlds. I mean, if you go into our collection, you go to the store, you're going to see, you know, array of, you know, the suitings and all the basics, and you're also going to see the fun stuff. So I think you had to compete somehow. You have to step up. I think it became a time that there's so much competition, you know, today. I mean, you really have to say, you know, I believe, you know, this is what I believe in. So obviously, again, it's a very difficult task, you know, follow Calvin's steps. But I think my work would have been really mediocre if I tried, you know, to reproduce what the master did, you know, Calvin has done. So I had to go my own way, you know, and it was a very honest way about it, you know. I just did what I could do, what I knew how to do, and I evolved, and I am evolving still. And I think
Sorry. I was going to say that one of my favorite collections that you did recently was from spring '09, where it was sort of origami, and you sort of made squares and rectangles conform to the female shape. I mean, you somehow magically made all these lines look graceful on curves. And to me, that was not at all about pragmatism, and that was not what I would normally think of as sort of traditional Calvin Klein. I mean,
No.
can you talk just a little bit about that collection?
Right. I mean, I think what you have 30 outfits. You have 8 minutes to send a message. So
Isn't that amazing?
Your
Just
message
8 minutes and like how many months and hours? And
exactly. So
much
I think the
torment.
message has to, relay some sort of, magic. It has to say something, whatever you believe in, And at times, it just serves as a light. You know what I mean? As the way people perceive you, and how. So that collection, how we started, it was somehow very architectural. I always tend to look into shape, forms, very geometric shapes, what have you. But how to challenge myself, to create clothes out of those shapes, and it was a very grueling sort of process, make that happen. But at the end, it was a collection that was very light. It was very architectural, in many ways. Not the easiest collection to wear, but it took a real interesting person. It opened up also this one customer that wanted to explore it.
Yeah.
So I think I'm very being in the corporation of Calvin, being in the company. I'm very lucky, and sort of I had enough. I mean, they gave me enough room to play, because we know what Calvin's about. We know what's there, and it's solid. But I have like 5 minutes to say a message, and I'll say it. So that's pretty much the take. But when I think, back to your question about, American dressing, or how I find American fashion was very liberating, and I think Claire Mercado, for instance, basically when she used to take her trips to Europe, and many times, we'd see cotton dresses that were somehow Dior-like, what have you. There was a very manufacturing base behind, the thinking of how can I express that in a much easier way. It's like, how can you buy the clothes in the supermarket, in a sense.
And when you say
So I find that-
liberating, you mean specifically in the way that the garments are constructed, or in sort of a cultural liberation?
I think both ways, because it's a liberation of a construction, right? It's a liberation of eliminating, so much of that, what had supported the shape, for instance. And back to what I tried to do here with this collection that was so geometric, is really to create shapes that were completely sustainable. The fabric really created it. So there was most of the clothes you can absolutely fold it, and just pack in a very easy way. And the clothes was supposed to be somehow demystified, you know what I mean? By folding it, by creating all this wrinkles, and just easy to pack. But and the concept was so much more forward, in a sense that it was just an initiation of a concept of a collection that one would really buy, out of a supermarket. You could stack the whole clothes. So you have the collars, and you have the t-shirts, and you have
I love the vision of
skirts.
Calvin Klein at my Whole Foods.
No, but I'm saying that that's a global image, and the way you go and you pick, something out of supermarket, you could actually eventually pick up clothes. So there was a very, I'm talking is just the concept itself, that for me to make that perfect, and obviously to achieve that sort of final ideal would take 4 or 5 years, because it's all about the fabric consumption, the packaging. So
It also seems like there's something in that that also speaks to the way that Yoli, that you think about clothes as well. That sense of, when you said, or maybe it was in the introduction, the idea of the nomad and someone who is constantly moving. And I also love the idea that you consider your clothing as a form of shelter. And I mean, do you, in some ways, I can almost see, and I think I've written this, that there's something very European too in the way that your designs come across. And I don't know if that's because they seem to be aspiring to do something more than just be pretty.
You know, it's a process for all of us, I think, designing. And I do spend a lot of time thinking about form and function and wearability and, identity. But I also spend a lot of time thinking about shape and advancing construction. And I think it was my fall 2008 collection, I started, I had actually started by boxing the bottoms of skirts, making a box out of the bottom of a skirt. And then an architect friend of mine said, Yoli, why don't you make clothes out of cubes? So I made the whole, it was a very interesting, it's a very interesting moment because my show was right when the new museum opened. So Sana was my inspiration, the architects. And, we were in the cube building.
Right.
And so I constructed all these clothes made out of cubes. And some of them were really challenging because they poked out at very obscene angles. My solution was to cut them in knits so they would collapse gracefully. And as my collections evolved, I went from the cube collection to counting because toward the end of 2008, everything tanked. So I made a collection, and actually a piece of it is installed at this museum. It's zero waste because I realized that, fall of 2009 was all about counting, how many, how much. And coincidentally, I had this soundtrack that was all about counting, 1, 2, 3, 4 in Japanese and English and French. And it ended up with Blossom Dearie singing Figure 8, which is infinity. And I was so entranced by it. Actually, you can hear the whole soundtrack if you use the iPod because the museum was kind enough to actually run the whole tape of the entire sequence of the show, musically.
Oh my God.
And sound became a texture. It was like architecture was the environment, shelter was the clothing, and then sound became the environment within which I could make clothes.
Now, were you drawn to this because it was a design challenge? I mean, was there an element of, I just want to see if I can do this?
Absolutely. It's fun. It's also, what the heck, But thinking about sound as the invisible environment was very exciting for me. So I started thinking about, well, how do you express sound visually? So I made my Spring 9 or Spring 10 collection was all about sound waves. So you have a lot of things that were weaving. And then I took that one step further by thinking about sound vibrations. If you have, what do you call it? Steel grain, and you have sound vibrating against it, it forms shapes. So for my most recent collection, I can't remember what it is, Fall 10, right? I did a collection that was based on sound and vibration. And coincidentally, I ran into a woman, a busker, who was playing a saw. I ran into her at Grand Central Station, and I invited her to do the music for my show. So it was a collection.
Randomly in Grand Central Station?
Randomly, yes. She was just blown away because she said that this is a very strange world that I've entered into.
Did she ask for ID?
And when we rehearsed, you know, the girls couldn't walk because they couldn't stop looking at her, and they thought that she was making sound out of air. Because, you know, when you play the saw, it's very grand gestures, but, you know, it's not really visible what she's doing. So,
I mean, I hesitate to even ask this question, but I mean, would you be a different kind of designer if you were working in Paris, where you were sort of surrounded by that many more designers who were taking on challenges just to see if they could?
I think that I really respect my peers. I'm in a great environment in New York. And I was going to
no
ask...
disrespect to New York, just, you know, it's apples and oranges we're comparing here. I'm just
Okay,
wondering
but-
if you feel that that location would change anything about the way that you work.
It's very interesting that you bring this up right now, because I'm involved in a study called Made in Midtown, where we're trying...
Nice segue.
Well, it's an important point. It's connected completely to what you raised. It's whether what you do and how connected it is to the proximity of the hands that make the clothes. And I think that intrinsically, I identify myself as a New York designer, because what I do comes out of my environment, and my challenges come from the peers that work in the same district. But I wanted to ask you another question, not to get away from Made in Midtown, which is there an American moment right now in fashion? Like, you see it from many different perspectives, from city to city. And I'm just curious about your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there is a shift towards a more American sensibility, in the sense that, well, in the sense that, you know, the whole notion of sort of sportswear as, you know, as a design sensibility is becoming stronger. And there's also less of a focus on ornamentation, less of a focus on just sort of seeing how much stuff you can put on clothes and on fabric, and how you can sort of torture the fabric to some degree, and more of an emphasis on trying to mold the fabric to the female body, as opposed to making the female body sort of work its way into the clothes. You know, it's much less about, you know, I'm thinking about, for instance, in Italy with Prada, and the emphasis on, you know, an hourglass silhouette. I mean, that's to a great degree an enormous shift.
Do you think they look good?
I think the hourglass shape is a lovely shape.
No, I
And,
agree. I agree with you. I'm just questioning in general.
You know, I think that it was an overstatement to make a point. So some of it, yes, I did think looked good. Some of it was an exaggeration that's, you know, as unattractive as, you know, an exaggeratedly straight silhouette, or an exaggeratedly matchstick kind of silhouette. So, but I do think there's more of an appreciation for just sort of the natural shape of women, which to me is more American, as opposed to, say, you know, in some of the other cities.
So I guess you're equating, I don't mean to sound so serious, but I guess functionality, comfort, wearability, and all those aspects are more connected with American design.
One, also, I think a recognition of a woman as a more athletic, physical person, as
Absolutely.
opposed to in Europe.
Right.
And I think
And
that physicality is coming through in the clothes, and I think that's American.
You used another word about the European fashion, which is it's more decorative. And so I'm going to come back to your answer. I don't think I do too well in Paris.
Fair enough. But you raised, or had me actually raise a point in talking about the physicality of the models, and that the models, the way that shows are presented, has been a big part of the fashion conversation. And you, I know, Yoli, you've regularly used sort of non-standard models as a way of showing your clothes. And this season, Francisco, you had older models in the showing the collection. And one of the things that I thought was very interesting about that was that it was done without any hoopla, without any sort of look at what we're doing. They were just there. I mean, what do you think women want to see when you market your clothes, when you put on a fashion show, or when you put together an ad campaign, or put a collection on the runway? Do women want pure fantasy? Do they want to see larger models who somehow make them feel like they're seeing themselves on the runway? I mean, in your sense of what's going on, I mean, what do you feel like it is that they want from you? What do women want?
Well, I mean, it's a very broad question for me to answer, but what I felt like my customer wanted is sort of, Calvin, if you think of the wave movement, Calvin started that. Yeah. And it was a brilliant move, and he is always a visionary when it came to that, and his casting was always perfect. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So I think we've lived with that in mind for quite a long period of time, and I was very intimidated, by changing that, because there was such an association with the house for the longest time. So again, everything is a process of growth, of understanding. The same way we do campaigns with different people, or more ethnic, women, what have you. So it was a very sort of conscious effort to change that, and I've been trying for the last 2 years to give it a twist, or to make that direct contact with the person who's buying my clothes. Because in reality, no 16-year-olds are buying my clothes. They who walks into the store really, she's 45, and I love to think that my customer's 45, because I think it's the woman that I want to dress.
God bless you.
I swear, because you know why? Because I think it's the moment where a woman, she's so comfortable with herself. She just knows, it reads that way to me. So I feel like that middle age. I don't know what have you. Not middle age, because 45 is not middle age. But I feel that was the intent, to bring models that were wonderful then, and it's still incredible now. You know what I mean? It's almost an easy street casting. You know what I mean? I wish just to be able to go on the streets and just start casting from the street. As a concept, I would love to do that, someday, because it is what I envision for my clothes. It speaks direct to that person.
Was there
with no sensationalism behind it?
Was there a concern that stepping too far away from what had been so associated with Calvin Klein, that the waif image would sort of disrupt the continuity, or sort of be just, that's not Calvin? Or
yes, I always, but I think the greatest thing about Calvin is that he never looked back. It's always the next, always the future, always what's, always the fresh, always the youngest, and it's so legitimate to the brand, and that's what created the brand, and that's why the brand also has such a longevity and such a long-lasting life. I mean, it's an incredible brand. So I think it's something that we always keep around the back of our minds. You know what I mean? What's next? How to approach the next. And ultimately, you go and you look for the new model, and the new model is a young model. So, but it became a little bit too formulaic for me. And I felt that I really needed to talk to the customer. I needed to talk to the woman who, who understand, the ease and the fun of the clothes. So I'm very happy that it worked that way. And
then you had Stella.
I can tell that
Stella was amazing. Chris was
Maria
amazing.
has something to say on this subject.
I mean, I think, you know, the show is one thing, but I have to say it's very hard. I mean, especially if you're a small company to do a show, because you basically dealing with the models that the agencies are sending you, and they're only sending you the new girls, because a lot of the girls who are older, more mature, refuse to do the shows because they don't want to be put next to a 16-year-old Russian girl who just arrived. You know, so there is that whenever you're casting a show, it's a very difficult thing to try and put together the characters. For me, it's always about each girl has to have their own personality, so it doesn't become about just the clothes. It has to be about them looking good, and it's not just about the dress, you know, and they have their own personality, because I think for me that's really important. And I have to say, the first show I did in New York, I did have all real people, only one model, and it bombed. The editors do not want to see the clothes on real women. It's not exciting for them. They want to be able to relate, oh, I shot her last week. Oh, you know.
You're right about that.
Sasha, you had Sasha. Sasha's great. Forget the dress. It's all about Sasha. You know what I mean? It's just, it's the way the cookie crumbles, you know?
So
and they don't want to, you know, it's the truth.
So is it that if you use the real women in the show, that the editors dismiss the collection whole,
they're just not
and they
that
don't
interested.
want to photograph
They
it?
don't want too much reality, you know. I mean, I've always used our I've always used our Fed model, who is, you know, she's not old, she's 30 years old, but you know, I've worked with her for 9 years, and every year it got harder and harder, because basically she would have to be put next to these 15-year-old girls, and it's not because we wanted 15-year-old girls. I mean, most of the time I say, no, you're too young, you're too skinny, you're too pretty, and my daughter's older than you. You know, so for me it was a very weird thing also, because I don't want to endorse that idealism of a girl when I have a teenager. So for me it's always a bit, you know, what am I trying to say with the casting? And I'm very careful with that, because I also don't want people to think, oh my gosh, she's got an 18-year-old, she's sending 15-year-old anorexics down the runway. So for me it's a very emotional thing as well. But it is hard, because I personally, being a small company, we're left to deal with what the agencies will send you. And, you know, we don't have the budget to cast, like, you know, somebody that we could fly them in and get them to do just our show, something which would be ideal. But a lot of the older girls don't model anymore. They only come out by a special appointment. They don't. I mean, it's very much you have to bring them in, and they're great. But, you know, the average model agency just sends you all the new girls who are trying to get into the business. So you get this sort of, you know, very difficult.
Do they not do the clothes? I don't want to say justice, because I don't want to imply that they're not good, but do they not tell the full story of the clothes?
I think it's hard because, you know, and I'm not knocking them, because they're beautiful and they're lovely. I mean, I personally try and cast them so they have personality, because I feel like the clothes should look like they're part of themselves, not just that they've been dressed by somebody, because I hate that feeling that they're being dressed like Barbies. So in a way, I try to always cast a strong girl, somebody who has their own personality, but it's not easy. And I think, you know, there's some that are stronger than others, and there's some girls who come in and they just have a great personality. And, you know, most of the models who are the big models, who are the main models, are the ones with the personalities, and they're the ones that have the longevity, because they have their own character.
Yeli, what are the pitfalls of using real women in your clothes? Or are you?
It's a lot more work. No, it's a lot more work, because, you know, when you do a standard size, which is 0 to 4, you know, you have less to fit. But if you use real women, not that the girls are not all real women, they're soon to be women. You have, you know, you have various body types. You may have somebody with, you know, a size 12 top and a size 8 bottom. So you get into irregular sizing. So the fittings take longer, and it actually costs more.
And what's the reaction to those women on the runway?
Well, I put them in the subway station, so it mitigated the reaction.
But I really believe, though, that that's what's just happening now. I think there will be a movement towards that. I mean, I really honestly believe, and I hope so, because it's much better for business. You know, first of all, you know, you'd have to, you know, your patterns would have to be, you know, you don't need to right away. You do a size 6, a size 8, you know, right in production. You know what I mean? I think funny enough, we did an event in Brazil. We were invited to participate in this TV show in Brazil called Fashion Rocks, which we've done a couple, all over the world, actually, many places. So Calvin, as a company, we invited to participate. And then I felt like we needed to have girls that were more like Victoria's Secret girls. You know, and this was like last October or something. Not because, just because it felt to me that at that moment, you know, I need to see women.
Yeah,
You
I
know?
think there's also something.
So there was something up in the air that just telling that we have to switch, you know. I mean, retail, everybody's suffering, you know, never mind the crisis, you know. I'm going to quote somebody also that said something really interesting in this conference we were in Australia, that we're not just a financial crisis we're living a moral crisis. So you know,
Yes, we
because
are.
it's so much, and it's so much out there. You know, too many airlines, too many of everything.
Francisco.
So it's now time to start to become more sensitive to the women.
Can
to
I
that.
get you to tell us about the kind of shows that are happening in Melbourne? Because I thought that was so interesting.
It was really incredible because it was a week of shows. It's a fashion week, but it's totally to support retail, which is amazing. So, you know,
So
the
it's
major
in the-
magazines are involved. You know, Harper's Bazaar, Vogue, what have you, and all the big stores, the department stores, for instance. So they put up shows in incredible tents. I mean, really amazing space, really first class. And they do the shows, and you buy tickets to get into the show, you know, and what's in stores. So it's a direct sort of communication, which is so,
Direct marketing and
Correct.
cuts the designer out.
you know, no, it doesn't, because you're a
not
designer, you
directly.
have to be there already. You have to be in the stores,
store,
of
right?
course.
Yeah.
So
You know, it
you're
does not cut.
essentially,
It's
you're
just
there selling
it
your clothes.
validates even more the designer because you're there promoting it, and it's ready
Oh,
to.
you mean you went to do a promotion?
No, I'm saying a designer. You know, the department stores. You know, they buy you, they buy me, they buy you. So there's that moment that they're going to actually show that again. It's available now. You can go and buy it.
Yeah.
You know, so it's
cuts
immediate.
the
What I'm-
issue
So-
that's been raised recently, that with so many just sort of customers able to go online and look and watch a show in real time or see images from that show immediately, and you know it's February, you know, and it's cold outside, and they're looking at fall clothes, but then they go to the store and you know there's nothing but summer dresses. So I mean, it really does speak to the idea that at the end of it all, you're really doing this for the consumer. You're not doing
Yeah,
it
but I think
for-
it's a great
But
thing. Right
then
now, for instance,
the
if you
re-
had a
yeah.
show of all summer clothes right now, and everybody
The reason I asked you to bring it up is because in New York now, at the CFDA, there's been a lot of conversation about doing something similar to what Francisco described to me, which I found, you know, that there's another, in Melbourne, they're actually doing what we're talking about. But when I said that it cuts out the designer, what I meant was, does it take away, I mean, are there no longer any individual designers showing at the same time?
No, it's a retail conference basically, right? So
I
it's
see. So it's not really Fashion Week the way we
Bloomingdale's-
have-
No. It's
Not
it's
at
a
all.
retail.
Commercial.
It's commercial.
Also,
which
there are
is-
different season to us. So basically,
Exactly.
you're showing the collection when it's actually hit the stores rather than when it's just been shown for the press.
Imagine if Bergdorf
Right.
Goodman, Bloomingdale's,
Yeah.
and Saks all decided to put a show together now. You know, so it's tomorrow is the show, and whatever you're going to see there on the great models and everything made really amazing are the clothes that are in the stores. So I think it validates, you know, it gives that oomph, you know, I can actually watch the show and then I may be able
And
to
then go
buy that
shopping.
clothes, right? Because, you know, all this talk about, you know, buy over the internet, I mean, you have to produce the clothes. I mean, you really need the time. You need the fabrics have to arrive. There's no way you can produce, you can
But
show
also,
it.
I feel like more and more, you know,
ship it. How can you do that?
With clothes, I think that the
Right?
whole thing
There's
of
no way.
Wait, hang on.
But it's very
Kids,
interesting what they
we're
did.
having a little side conversation there.
I'm not too excited. How about any questions?
Maria.
No, I was just saying, but in a way, you know, the whole thing of doing trunk shows is so valid
So?
because I think people, nobody needs any more stuff. So I think people would need to have some sort of emotional connection to either a brand or a designer or something, rather than, because it's become so abstract and there's so much stuff out there. There's so much of everything that unless you have some sort of personal connection to something, you don't want it. You're not going to go shopping for something that, it doesn't speak to you.
Well, how do you
So-
guys form that connection? I mean, I can understand how you can form it via advertising, but if you're not advertising and you can't do a trunk show everywhere,
You're in the store sometimes.
so is it
it's very
just a
helpful to
matter
be in the
of
store.
constantly being in the store, dealing with customers?
Yeah, I'm not in the store constantly, but I am there. I am in the store in the back, so I hear the comments, and I'm there, when some of the selling appointments are going through the wholesale, and I'm always aware of what's going on. And also, I know for myself, we have a little team, and everybody's wearing the clothes, so I know when something's been successful because everybody orders the same thing, There's one dress right now that everybody ordered, and it's like the biggest seller in the store. We sold like 60 of them this month. And it's like amazing. And then that's sort of, for me, that's why I started with the store, because I felt that there was always this filter with the press. And it meant that the filter that they put through meant that you would see these amazing images in the press, and then you would actually go in the stores and see some really boring stuff, because by the time the buyers got to it, it would be so, trivialized that it would just look like nothing. So in a way, having a store allows us to just put it there. Not everything's a success, but it allows us to sort of educate the client, and they get involved, and they also say, "Oh, I love that dress last year. And are you going to do it?" I say, "Well, this is the new version, and and it allows us to move on the taste level and the perception of the collection as well."
Does the press just sort of get in the way of your communicating your message directly to the consumer? Press and company accepted, of course, but
It's a good, and it's one of those. It's like it's a good and it's bad. It depends. Too much press is bad. Too little press is bad. I mean, you have to constantly be there.
I think all press is good press.
Yeah.
that's why you're my favorite. No, I'm kidding.
Do you want to say here?
You can't take it personally.
Yeah, Robin.
You know what I mean? I mind you, we get upset sometimes. But it's like, you're out there, it's...
Well, I feel sometimes they kill things before they even happen. Because by the time they get to the stores, they've been so overexposed, like everybody shoots the same dress, and then by the time it gets to the store, it's old. Nobody wants it anymore. They want it on sale. They don't want it anymore. And that's why I think some of the pre-collections now are doing much better than the main collections, because those sort of collections don't get as much press. So they have longevity in the stores.
You guys have had some experience with the First Lady press machine and her fashion press. I mean, how has that been a positive in the sense that it's not in terms of raising profile, but in actual terms of sales?
I think, like Francisco said, basically, that any press helps. I mean, there's good and bad press, but yeah, I mean, it certainly helped to keep the name out there and keep people coming through the door. I mean, it didn't hurt at all.
And how has she changed the industry? Or has she? Just by her not only wearing a vast array of American designers and other designers as well, but also not necessarily wearing the usual suspects.
I think she basically put the message out there is that real women will buy whatever suits them. They're not looking at magazines to be told what to wear. And basically, whether it's this design or that design, she's not scared to mix it up. And whether it's J. Crew or The Gap and, Calvin Klein, whatever it is, it's about freedom. And it's about the fact that I think a lot of the time people underestimate women, and they try to sort of sell them this thing. And most women, they have the freedom to shop, and if they have the freedom to shop, they will buy high and low. And if they want a pair of leggings, I'll buy a pair of leggings from over 21 from my daughter. She got a pair of leggings. I'll get the same leggings. I mean, I'm not a snob. There's not this snobism about clothing anymore. If a piece of clothing is well designed, it's just well designed. It doesn't matter the price point anymore.
Is that a particularly American way of approaching fashion, that willingness to mix high and low, or I suppose it's also sort of a British way too.
I think it's British as well, yeah, and American.
I think it's
becoming more global.
Don't you think it's a global
More and
thing?
more.
It is.
I think it's
Because-
becoming more and more.
Yeah. I think it's a good thing.
And when you say the underestimation of women, what impact does celebrity have on them when they see a dress on the red carpet? I mean, I know that, I get the flood of emails during award season of who's wearing what, and we all race to get it up there on the website and, and make a big deal about it. But is it more just sort of curiosity that women have for
It
those
sells a lot of
celebrity
frocks
images?
for ABS.
That's exactly what it is.
Those frocks end up on prom night.
Alan.
That's so true.
What is the benefit there? And
We have seen people come into the store with their sheets. I want that. You know what I mean? How can I get that? I want to get married in that, or this. You know what I mean? It does affect, I think, and it affects so much so that, covers of, you used to think of, the magazines used to have models in their covers, and for how long now it's been, celebrities. And it's very hard for me to say whether if it's a good thing or bad thing. I think it's just a sign of the times. There's some things that are just how it is. I mean, whether if we think
It's a sign of the moral crisis.
it is, but you have to survive, and then you have to be, either you fight or you just give up. So.
I mean, I also think the celebrity thing is not totally a negative thing. It depends which celebrity as well. I mean, Lindsay Lohan, Tilda Swinton. I mean, there's two different camps, I mean, I don't mind Tilda Swinton. Do you know what I mean? There's two different things, and I think there's something that also elevates your image if you have somebody that you actually respect wearing your clothes. And that shows to other women that it's another real woman doing something amazing, like Michelle Obama or whoever, Tilda Swinton or Cindy Sherman. Not a teen celebrity, of course, but on the whole, if it's interesting women, it's great. When Eva Mendes wears, you think she looks amazing, and all these.
She brought a whole different customer to us, in many ways. I mean.
Yeah, and probably like more of a
Very
sexy.
approachable.
what did she bring?
Huh?
Who was that new customer?
Well, it's a more Latino customer,
Yeah.
right? I mean, a more ethnic customer.
Essential.
So
I think,
there was
no?
that vibe, you know what I mean? Not just obviously in collection, but throughout the company with great underwear ads that she did in the jeans, what have
I
you.
know,
So
she looks amazing.
she looks amazing. I mean, so it's like it's just so much, great marketing too, tool when you strategize in that way, and I think it's very important. It's very.
Well, before we open to
It's not frivolous.
audience
You know what I mean?
questions.
There's a reason for that, and I think it's business.
Speaking of frivolous and the moral crisis, I mean, how does a designer who, I mean, you make stuff, and you make stuff that is designed to inspire desire, as opposed to things that you could say that we actually need. I mean, how do you balance if there's a moral crisis? I mean, how do you deal with that when you're in the design studio saying, here I am, I'm making more stuff?
We're employing people in New York. There's jobs, and we're trying to do something that is well designed, hopefully has a longevity. It's not about, I mean, I feel for all three of us, it's not just about a season. So the pieces become interchangeable from season to season. It's not like it's about one thing, and then the next season the collection becomes obsolete and you have to throw it away and start again. So no, it's hard. I mean, we've looked into like fabrication and everything, but it's very difficult to have very high morals when you're in the fashion business because you're constantly producing things. Right. But at the same time, in order to do that, you have to justify it by doing things that are really well designed, well priced, good quality, and employing people. I mean, there's a big,
You can
business
produce with integrity.
yes.
And you can make clothes with zero waste. Which is a contribution. Zero waste meaning no wastage of fabric, energy, time. And I think that all of us have to deal with that one ultimate luxury, which is time. And if you design something really well, you do manage to save time for the client, which I think is the essence of what's valuable today.
And I think that there's always value in things that are beautiful.
That's right.
Yeah, I think we have a responsibility, you know, especially in the designer world, you know, otherwise you're just going to blend into a different market. So it's our responsibility to be challenging, to challenge ourselves, to challenge, you know, the viewer, to challenge the customers, you know, and to elevate, you know, our trade, you know.
And have fun.
Otherwise, you can see very well, you know, how many lines, you know, you have. This one having, for instance, I shouldn't say.
Go on.
You know, J Lo having, you know, a line, and this one has a line. You know, everybody could have a line and call themselves designers, but
My line comes
I
out
think,
next season.
I think. Thank you very much. So I think it's kind of demoralizing for our trade, for our industry. So I think, you know, we have to keep ourselves, you know, at all really, you know, thinking of the design, and it's what moves, you know, it's the creativity, it's the design is it, you know what I mean, when it comes to success and respect.
Better have something well designed than bad, you know. Maybe one good thing. If you buy one good thing a year instead
Exactly.
of 10 crappy things, it's quite good.
Well, I thank the panel for being so fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you, Robin.
And thank you all for coming.